Hello, everyone. My name is Darby Jones from EF Explore America, and I have the pleasure of overseeing our educational partnerships around the country. I want to welcome all of you, teachers and students and EF staff members from around the country and around the world, to this truly unique and special opportunity to hear from a survivor of the attacks on September 11th, 2001, exactly 21 years ago this Sunday. This is only possible through an incredible partnership we have with the 9/11 Tribute Museum that has already afforded thousands of students who are traveling with EF to meet survivors and first responders on their educational trips while visiting New York and be profoundly impacted by their powerful stories of survival. I want to soon turn this over to our featured speaker of the day, Peter Bitwinski. We are so grateful you are here with us today to courageously share your story, in addition to sharing a bit of historical context of that fateful day. For everyone in classrooms, in offices, or at home, if you haven't already done so, please switch from gallery view to speaker view. And we would love if you have any questions to type them into the chat or the Q&A, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can at the end, time permitting. My wonderful colleague, Sarah Shaban, Sarah, will monitor the chat and facilitate the latter portion of today's program. So with that said, welcome, Peter, and over to you.
Thank you, Darby. It's a pleasure to be here, and welcome to all the students that are listening in. I am a survivor. I worked on the 69th floor of Tower 1 for over 20 years in World Trade Center. So my connection to the World Trade Center is as a worker, a evacuee, and survivor. The attacks on World Trade Center, and I say attacks because there were multiple attacks, happened first in 1993, the first attack, and the second and major attack happened on September 11th of 2001. For me, life in the World Trade Center started much earlier. I began working in the World Trade Center in 1978. It was a great time in my life. I was young. I was recently out of college. I was working in the greatest city in the world, I thought, New York City, and at the time, the most famous building in the world. So for me, it was truly a privilege to have that opportunity to be a worker in World Trade Center and launch my career there. I'm an accountant, so I was a back office worker, working on accounting tasks and in accounting roles. And it was great for me to have World Trade Center as my second home. I live in New Jersey, so I used to take a subway train that took me underneath the Hudson River. And then once I got underneath the World Trade Center, I took 2 escalators and 2 elevators to get to my office on the 69th floor. The World Trade Center had what they call center core construction. So all the important parts of the building were in the center of the building. The elevators, the staircases, the bathrooms, the electrical, and the plumbing were all in the center of the building. And then you went through one of 4 doors to get into your office. In my case, the west door. And when you opened the door, it was open office space. You could see literally from one end of the floor to the other. The World Trade Center also had uniqueness in their windows. The windows were floor-to-ceiling windows, so that you could, on a clear day, like today in the east, see huge distances. From my floor on 69, I could see nearly 70 flights down, or all the way to the mountains on a clear day. So it was just a wonderful opportunity and a wonderful view every day, having the World Trade Center as my workplace. I never would underestimate what a privilege it was to have that. So the first 15 years for me were wonderful years working in the World Trade Center. The first bad thing that happened with the first attack in 1993. It was a cold Friday, February 26th afternoon when the bombing took place. The terrorists who were supposedly planning it in Jersey City, New Jersey, loaded a van with explosives and drove that van through the Holland Tunnel and into the parking garage beneath the World Trade Center, which was 7 stories below ground. It was an unsecured parking garage because at the time, they didn't need security. Times were different. Terrorists took advantage of that. They left their van in the parking garage. They had a timer and a detonator. They detonated their bomb and they blew the sub-levels of the building. I was upstairs in my boss's office talking about a financial matter on the 69th floor when the bomb went off. When the bomb went off, the lights went out immediately, and within 5 minutes, smoke had reached our floor. We knew something serious had happened, but we were okay because we had planned for emergencies. We had fire drills, and it's a testament, if you have them at your schools, to always take them seriously. The fire drills taught us to avoid the elevators, go to the staircase, go down 3 flights, and congregate on the floor to await further instructions. Of course, we were following those instructions, but it was kind of nothing like that on the day of the bombing. The staircase was loaded with people because very few people went out for lunch that day. The bomb had gone off at 12:18 in the afternoon. So there were many people above us in the staircase, many people below. There was a lot of heat, a lot of smoke, no lights and no announcements. We were moving very slowly down the staircase. At times we were stalled just standing in the staircase with a lot of smoke coming up. I remember at one point a woman behind me starting to cry and asked me what was going to happen. And honestly, for the first time in my life, I didn't know how to answer her other than just to stay calm, which she did. We only, though, got down to the 47th floor, in my case from 69, and we were herded onto the floor and told to wait there. In 1993, unlike 2022, there were not the major communication methods that you have now. There were no iPhones, there were no instant ways to know things. So we had to wait it out, and we waited it out for many hours. And finally, the firefighters cleared the staircase and allowed us to exit down the staircase. I remember exiting to the street. It was after 6 p.m. that evening. Remember, the bomb went off at 12:18, and I just remember a lot of chaos, a lot of emergency vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks, people running around. Thereafter, they needed to make sure that although the tragedy happened and 7 people died, the building itself was rocked, but it didn't come down. And they had to make sure that the building was still structurally sound. They had to clean and repair the building, and that took about 6 or 8 weeks. And then we were finally invited back to return. I returned for 2 reasons. Number one was I had a job that I struggled to get and I didn't want to lose. And number 2 was I didn't think the building would be attacked again, similar to my coworkers. So we all pretty much returned. And it seemed to be a good decision because initially, and especially as time passed in the next 8 years, New York bounced back, World Trade Center bounced back. There are a lot of wonderful things that happened at World Trade Center. I always remember in the plaza area outside the buildings, they would put up stages where they brought in live bands to play. They brought in Broadway plays from the theater district to perform part of their play on a stage outside also, where you could walk up for free and see excerpts of a Broadway play. Sports teams were winning, teams like the Yankees, the Giants, and the Rangers. And when teams won a championship, a few blocks away from the World Trade Center was Broadway. And they had these things called ticker tape parades where they celebrated the champions. And I remember being a part of the crowd in those winning moments. And it was just really special to be a New Yorker and a person that enjoyed all of that. So everything was back to normal. And it became the morning of September 11th of 2001. The terrorists had planned the attack months prior, according to information we found out later. The terrorists, there were 20 of them, boarded 4 cross-country flights, both in Boston, 2 from Boston, Massachusetts, Logan Airport, and 2 from Newark Liberty International Airport. And about 15 to 20 minutes into each of the 4 flights, the 5 terrorists on each flight took over the plane. They hijacked it. They eliminated the flight crew, and they began flying their planes with a mission. The first plane flew down the Hudson River as a guide and struck the North Tower of One World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m. at the 91st floor that plane hit. The second plane also came from Boston, Massachusetts, flew down the Hudson River, except it kept going when it reached the World Trade Center, turned south around the Statue of Liberty and headed north again and struck the South Tower at 9:17 a.m. And it struck the South Tower with that second plane at about the 78th floor. The third plane emanated from Newark, was intended to fly cross-country west until it was hijacked, and that plane detoured and struck the Pentagon and crashed into the Pentagon, killing 148 people at 9:37 a.m. The fourth plane also emanated from Newark Airport, and with a cross-country flight west, was hijacked. But on that plane were passengers who heard from the friends and family members about the fate of the other 3 airliners. So that fourth plane, the passengers decided to retake the plane from the terrorists. So they crashed into the cockpit. Unfortunately, the terrorists flew that fourth plane into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, killing everyone aboard. But those passengers were lauded as heroes because they tried to do something. They tried to retake their plane, and they're honored as heroes. And there's even movies and books about them. For me, the day of September 11th started off beautifully. Was another work day, but a beautiful day. I used to come to work early, so I was at my desk at 8:15 in the morning. A half hour later was when the plane struck my tower. It struck at the 91st floor, which is about 20 above me. It threw me onto my desk, and the next 1 to 2 minutes were the longest in my life. What I remember is that the building started to violently shake back and forth. I could hear the crunching sound of the steel of the building moving. I picked myself up off my desk that I was thrown onto, and I remember standing up, and beneath my feet, the floor was rolling. It felt like being on a skateboard, that everything would just crash beneath my feet and I'd go flying down the 69 flights. I remember whispering to myself, is this where it all ends for me? Is this where I die? But fortunately, the building righted itself, and then it became time to evacuate. Someone ran down and said that that we needed to evacuate. Another person ran down and said that they were facing a window where the plane had approached and hit the building. For me, the plane had hit the building from behind me, so I did not see it when the plane actually hit, but pretty early on, I knew it was a plane that hit the building. So it was time to evacuate. For me, my evacuation was somewhat more complicated because I have a friend who's paralyzed, a coworker friend named John Abruzzo, and John is in a motorized wheelchair. Motorized wheelchairs cannot get down a staircase, but fortunately, after the 1993 bombing, they brought in these things called evacu chairs. An evacu chair allows a handicapped person to get down a staircase. So I ran off to get the evacu chair, and when I came back, this great thing happened. 10 of my coworker friends hung around to help, and that was absolutely vital. And really a lesson for yourselves as students with your your student partners and your buddies at school that, it's good to always respect and be with your student buddies. So we unstrapped John from his wheelchair, lifted him into the evac chair, strapped him bottom and top there. We developed a quick plan, 2 guys at the bottom of the evac chair, 2 at the top. We'd rotate every 5 floors, and down the staircase we go. The staircase was not as loaded in 2001 as it was in 1993, so we were moving fairly well down the staircase. When we hit the floors of the 40s from the 60s, it got a lot hotter in the staircase. We decided to change staircases, hoping that the next staircase we went into was cooler. And it was a good choice because the other staircase was cooler. We went further down that staircase, and when we reached the floors of the 30s, that's when we began to encounter people moving up the staircase as we were moving down. These were most notably buildings operations people who were there as guides, and firefighters who were moving up the staircase. The firefighters were true heroes. They gained a much greater appreciation for what they do. They were walking up the staircase trying to either rescue people or do what they could with the fire. You've walked up a staircase in your lifetime. It's not a particularly easy thing for anyone to do. These firefighters were doing it with 80 pounds of equipment on their back, big iron picks, helmets, air packs. Some of them were noted to have reached the 78th floor, which I think when you go from the ground to 78 walking up with all that equipment is a tremendous thing. 343 firefighters died that day, and I'll always honor them and attribute and honor what they tried to do to rescue people. We went further down the staircase, and when we reached the 21st floor, we were asked to leave the staircase and go onto the floor. It was a police command center floor. While we were on that floor, they asked to take John from us, and we had said no. We had gone down the staircase so far with John. We'll continue as we had once we're allowed back in the staircase. We were only on that floor about 5 minutes when the building shook again. I wasn't near a window and I didn't see what was happening, but I found out later that that was the collapse of the other tower, the South Tower, coming down, that noise and vibration. Shortly after that, we were allowed to re-enter the staircase and go the rest of the way down. We had really only one panic moment when we reached the 10th floor on the staircase, when everything stopped. Some of my buddies had heard on the firefighters' radios that Tower 2 was down, so they began to panic and yell down that we got to get moving, we got to get moving. Shortly after that, we did begin to move again and continue the rest of the way down. I remember the lowest floors had a lot of smoke and debris and little water that we had to navigate around, but we successfully did that, and we reached finally the lobby of the building and to the street. And this was 10:15 in the morning, which is about an hour and a half after the plane hit. The one thing I noticed when we got outside was nobody was around. It was totally different than in 1993 when everybody was around. I did not know that the other tower was down. We moved north on West Street. We got to our first corner, met our first person. He said, hustle northward, which we did. We were glancing back at our tower. There was a lot of smoke and haze in the sky and what we thought was debris or pieces coming down. As we moved further north, we realized it wasn't debris or pieces coming down from the building. It was people, workers jumping from the highest floors, the 90s and the hundreds. They were trapped. The plane literally flew through the building and made their staircase covered with fire or smoke or giant steel beams. So many of them stayed up there as long as they could, but then finally, chose to jump when it became hopeless for them. It'll be always one of the sad memories I have of that particular day, of seeing the workers who just came to work that day, similar to the way we did, having to end their lives that day. It's why I believe terrorism is so unfair and why I detest it. We continued north on West Street. A few minutes later, the ground started to shake. We look up and a giant cloud is coming at us. We grabbed John, we crossed the street and got into the Stuyvesant School, closed the door behind us. We looked through the glass door in the window and it got gray and pitch black outside. And what that was the collapse of the North Tower, the tower that we had all worked in. So within 102 minutes, less than 2 hours, you had the 4 hijacked planes, the World Trade Center and the Pentagon that were struck with the planes, but most notably 2,753 people who died. Those individuals who died, it's now the 21st year where we memorialize them and we remember them because those were lives lost that were wonderful people, I'm sure, to the people, the friends and the families and the mothers and fathers and sons and daughters around them. So I, for one, will always remember the victims of the 9/11 attacks and the 1993 attacks. That night I spent in the hospital with John. He checked out okay, but we couldn't get him an ambulance to take him back home to Queens. So John and I spent the night in Beth Israel North Hospital. The following day, Manhattan opened up, New York City, and John was able to make it home and to Queens, New York, and I was able to make it home to New Jersey. So that ends my story as a worker, evacuee, and survivor. I have been honored to represent the 9/11 Tribute Museum in sharing my story and trying to describe exactly what it was like from a historical and personal standpoint. And I'm glad this day to be able to share that with all of you.
Peter, thank you so much for walking us through that and for sharing your experience that day. We talk a lot about, right before we started, we talked about how a lot of these students weren't alive for this, and it's really unique to be able to hear from someone who was there and experienced exactly what it was like. And it was different for a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, but really appreciate your story and your perspective. So thank you for that. I want to encourage those of you who are on the call to please, if you have questions, enter them into the chat or into the Q&A. I'm happy to ask those for you. In the meantime, I had a couple of questions that came up while you were chatting, and one of which was, it's incredible that you all rallied together to help people like John and each other and all get out and manage to be here to tell that story. I'm curious, are you still in touch with them? You know, the guys that you managed to get out with?
Mm-hmm. I am with just a couple of them. Most of all of us have retired and have gone to different places in the country. I stay in touch with just a couple of them, and we always try to, acknowledge that particular day.
Yeah, what an incredible shared experience, and a testament to the goodness of people in the face of something that is truly
I think so. I think as tragic and as difficult as that day was, I left out one important statistic, that 500,000 people came afterwards to help New Yorkers. That'll never be forgotten. As I have a viewpoint that there are terrible people in the world, but those are at the minimum. There's many, many more good people in the world than bad people.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and it was such a feeling of people coming together after that day that a lot of people hopefully remember more than some of the worst parts of it. Some positive came from that. I'm curious, having experienced something like that, it changes anybody, especially someone who was there. I'm curious how, having been through what you did, you might view the world differently now than you might have before.
I do in some ways. I mean, the biggest thing for me was the learning experience of valuing my life in an everyday kind of way. Not that I didn't do that before the 9/11 attacks, but I had to deal with the fact that I survived by less than 15 minutes. And, I had psychological counseling, and I'm not afraid to say that. And it helped me. And it kind of inspired me to live out every day as best as I could. And later on, it inspired me to give back. And that's why I joined the 9/11 Tribute Museum, to give back and share. And, my life was spared. And sometimes, I don't really know why or how, but I've learned that I need to look forward to, and I've tried to use that opportunity to do so.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's really a lasting impression on how valuable your life can be, and appreciating that moving forward.
Yeah.
I'm curious as well. We do have students on the call, and so much to learn from this account and these events. I'm curious, you personally, what advice might you have for students today who are learning this as a part of history, and how they might take some of what they learned from this moving forward in their own lives?
Well, I think the most important thing, and it's something we try to stress and emphasize at the Tribute Museum, is what we call service. Is in life, number one, you should try to help people rather than hurt people. And in helping people, you could do it in so many different ways. You could be at service to people in a formal way, or even an informal way. You could help in your neighborhood, in your church, in your school, in so many ways. You could kind of give back. And I think that's a good thing, particularly for young people, to try to embrace, is that I know myself, I always feel better when I'm giving, and more so than when I'm receiving. And I think if everybody tried to adopt a little bit of that, the world would be a better place, and your life and you would feel better as a person as you help others and as you share. And I believe those are positive things for all of us to try to embrace.
Thank you, Peter. That's amazing and helpful and thoughtful advice. I think leaning into the positivity and giving back to others is so important, and there's so much to be gained personally from giving in that way. So I appreciate that perspective, and a fantastic answer. I want to say thank you. We're coming up on 11:30, so I want to take a minute to say thank you. It is, like I said, so valuable for you to share your story and in your time with us, and to relive that day. And we're very grateful for that, and to have this time with you. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being here with us. And Darby, I want to see if you have anything to add as well.
Yeah, just echo that sentiment completely. Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, Peter. You've helped make this commemoration come alive and be real for all of us, and given a voice to those who no longer have one. So thank you to also everyone at home and in classrooms around the country for joining. A brief survey will pop up at the end of the presentation. So please, everyone, just take a moment to give us your feedback. That would be great. Peter, thank you again. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Darby and Sarah. I appreciate the opportunity, and to all the students out there, stay positive, live well, and enjoy life.
Thanks so much, Peter.
Take care.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too.
Take care.
See you.